Hey everybody, thank you for joining once again as myself and Chris, and we have a special guest. For me, he's below, and this is Dustin, and maybe to the right, to the left, but Dustin from Dustin and Blake, the channel here on YouTube. We wanted to get together and talk about some obscure or maybe lesser known films, and just kind of talk a little bit about that. This is actually Dustin's idea. He's been a friend of ours or mine for years in the YouTube community. And when we started doing this channel, Dustin had reached out and was like, hey, I have some ideas. Maybe we can all do them together and like jump in. I'm like, hey, Chris said, hey, more the merrier. And Chris and then Dustin gave us a couple ideas and maybe something to jump off, a jumping off point. So we picked between maybe 5, 6, 7 different films that we want to introduce maybe some people to. And maybe even to each other, and kind of go from there. So I was gonna real quick, Dustin, just if you want, just talk a little bit about you or your channel, or even a little bit about movies and what they mean to you and how you kind of got into this. Because I think our generation, we can kind of understand it, but for maybe younger generations, they'd rather have like a little phone, or they're on front of their iPads or their video games, and sitting in front of a TV for 2.5 hours is sometimes as a real test for them. So kind of about what was your journey like to be a film fan?
Okay, yeah. I guess just growing up, I remember we were always renting movies all the time. And since I started getting my own money, I've been collecting movies. You know, I had tons and tons of VHS tapes. Then once VHS was done, I was a DVD guy, and so I've always collected movies. I've always sought out good movies, and sometimes I seek out controversial movies or anything that is unique that I haven't seen before. I'm checking out movies from the library now. I got them all over on however many different streaming platforms there is. So yeah, I've just always sought out classic movies, and I don't know, just good shit.
So let me ask you real quick. I know Chris and I already talked about this, but I think this is something I'm gonna do on the fly. But obviously, I don't know how old you are, but you mentioned VHS. So did you growing up? I think you grew up in Minnesota. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. So in Minnesota, during the time you grew up, was there a mom and pop VHS store that you all would hang out and rent movies from? Do you have any memories of that, or was it like this Blockbuster or whatever?
I do. In the small town that I grew up in, we had a movie rental place. I was really little. I was like kindergarten, first grade, but I do remember it, and I remember they had a flat top Miss Pac-Man game there. So when you go rent movies, you could play.
Yes.
The only movie I can remember renting from there was the Garbage Pail Kids movie.
Oh, I love that movie. Yes.
Yes. But after that, started renting them from our local grocery store.
Yeah.
So it's part of it. It was part of a chain, smaller chain, like a Midwestern chain. But yeah, that's where I checked out most of my movies.
Awesome. I feel like all of us who grew up in the 80s and at least into the mid 90s have had a very similar experience with a local mom and pop video store, VHS shop, or like you said, a grocery store, or sometimes it was like at like a car cleaning place, like a place where they do like, a car cleaning place had a DVD or had a VHS shop. It could be all kinds of pharmacies. So all of us, I think, have a very shared, similar experience of that. So I always like to ask people, well, what was their experience like when they were growing up in your neck of the woods? So that's cool. So with that being said, I know that this was a topic that you kind of picked out. You gave us some options. We wanted to go with this one. So what's your first movie? We'll have you kick it off.
Okay. The first one I'm going to talk about is actually one that talked with you on the phone a little bit about, and it's called Wake in Fright, and it came out in 1971, and it's an Australian movie, and it was adapted from a book, and it was directed by Ted Kotcheff, who oddly enough directed First Blood and also Weekend at Bernie's.
There's a pedigree of films for you.
So well, let's see. I'll talk about who's in it. Gary Bond, who was in Zulu. That was the only movie that I recognized that he was in. And then being a horror fan, you'll know this guy, Donald Pleasance.
Oh, of course, Donald Pleasance. Halloween.
Yep, Dr. Loomis from Halloween, and he's in Prince of Darkness and some other ones. So this movie was once thought to be lost, and they only had like a few VHS tapes that were poor quality and some edited TV versions. But in 2004, somebody discovered the original master negative, and so they were able to re-release it. So it's actually the only film to premiere at the Cannes Film Festival twice, because they premiered it in 1971 and then again in 2009.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
So what the movie is about, it's about this school teacher, and he's teaching in this like rural school, and they get let out for Christmas break, and he's going to go see his girlfriend in Sydney. So he takes a train, but the train has a layover in this small town, and I wrote down the name of it. It's called Bundan-Yaba, but all the locals call it the Yaba. So it's really interesting. He goes to this small town, and everybody there, all they do is drink. It's just constant drinking. And there's so much beer drank in this movie. It's just incredible. So they're very they're very aggressively hospitable. Like they have very aggressive hospitality. Like, I'm going to buy you a beer and you're going to drink it. And if you don't like it, I'm going to be highly offended. So
Drink this and like it.
He goes to this bar and he gambles all of his money away, and then he's stuck there with all these people that all they do is drink, and they're like hyper masculine and super macho and all this stuff. He befriends a doctor who is played by Donald Pleasance, and he used to live in Sydney, but because of his alcoholism, he ended up stuck in the Yaba. There's a very, very notorious and a controversial scene where they go on a kangaroo hunt. So they all sit around, they get drunk, and then they decide they're going to go on a kangaroo hunt. Now this kangaroo hunt, the filmmakers decided what they were going to do. They're trying to figure out, like, how do we put this kangaroo hunt? Because they didn't have CGI. They couldn't make a fake kangaroo hunt. So they end up going with all these local hunters and filming this very brutal kangaroo hunt. I think they even, one of the producers actually passed out because of all the like kangaroos jumping around with their guts hanging out, and it's a crazy scene. I think at one point they just had to like pretend to have a malfunction and the lights didn't work anymore, so they could go home, so they didn't have to do it anymore.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, so when you see that disclaimer, no animals were harmed in the filming. The animals were actually harmed in the filming of this movie. So
so that was BS. If you see that pop up, you know that's BS.
Yeah. So after they get done with this, I'm not going to spoil any of these movies.
Sure.
But after they get done with this kangaroo hunt, he goes back to Doc's house, and something bad happens to him there. I'll leave it at that. I'll tell you a couple quotes from some critics on this.
Okay.
Martin Scorsese, He said it was deeply unsettling and disturbing movie that left him speechless. And Roger Ebert said it was powerful, genuinely shocking, and rather amazing. And musician Nick Cave said it was the best and most terrifying film about Australia in existence.
Wow.
And if you want to watch this, it is available to stream on Tubi.
Okay, I'm definitely that's gonna be on my list. So that is legit. Awesome. That's a good one to open up with. That was definitely something that I'm sure very few people know about. Had you ever heard about that, Chris? Have you ever heard of this movie? You're on mute.
No, I've never heard of it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. So Dustin open up with that one. What about you, Chris? Want to share with us one of your first picks?
Okay, so I guess continuing the trend of foreign films, the first one on my list is Parasite, which was released in 2019. It's got an IMDb rating of 8.6. And this is a South Korean film directed by Bong Joon-ho. And people kept talking about it. But, you know, I hate reading movies. I absolutely hate reading movies. But somebody finally talked me into it, and I was glad that I did. And essentially the premise of the story is this kind of lower class family that lives in Seoul, and the family kind of, you know, does petty crimes and things like that. And so they basically trying to find some way to get out of these slums. So one of the kids takes on a job working for this well-to-do family, and essentially they one by one start figuring out what services they need and bring in their family to fulfill these roles. So if somebody needs to get removed, like the dad was a driver, so they had to figure out some way to get rid of the driver, right? So they, you know, planted, I think it was like panties or something in the back seat, and Koreans being as traditional as they are, they figured he was sleeping around with somebody, so they fired him. So then the dad got the job, and then so on and so forth. And the family decides that they're going to go, the family that owns the house decide they're going to go on a camping trip. So the whole family converges to like have this party weekend at this house. And due to a storm, the family that owned the house comes back. And so now they're all stuck in the house and, you know, hiding from the family, trying to figure out how they're going to get out of there. So it was really good. It may sound simplistic on the surface, and I didn't want to give away too many spoilers, but you know, it was just it was really entertaining.
That's, you know, that I don't know if Dustin had seen that. I haven't seen Parasite, but I had heard people, I even think it won an Oscar or something for best foreign film or whatnot, maybe even, I don't know. And I had heard a lot of people talk about it, and I was surprised at how many people put that movie over. So now that you've talked about it, I guess I'll give it a shot, because I'm thinking the people who put that over are just people who just said we could have won an Oscar or whatever. I'm like, that movie cannot be that good. But maybe I'll give it a shot. Have you seen that? Have you seen that, Dustin?
I actually have seen it. I watched it shortly after it came out, and it's very good, very well made. It's a unique story.
Well, I also will do a foreign language film or a foreign film. We're all talking about foreign films. The one that a lot of people don't think about because of who the director is. But this movie the entire movie was in a foreign language, and that is Apocalypto. Mel Gibson movie. And this is probably one of the best shot movies I've ever seen. It was absolutely beautiful shot. And basically, it's a story about a husband and father who gets taken away from his village. It takes place in, I believe, the Mayan culture. And I believe it's the Incas, if I'm not mistaken, that are the aggressors in this. And they come and take away all these people all the men from the village, and they basically like kill off everyone else, all the women and children. They take the men and have them become slaves. And the story is about Tiger Paw, if I'm not mistaken. That's what he went by. His name was Tiger Paw, and it's basically a story about him trying to get back to see if he can save his family's life. And the Incan warriors, and I want to say Incan, I could be wrong. I mean, it's Jaguar Paw. I don't know if I said that, but I want to say it's Inca. I could be wrong about that, but anyways, so and it's about that journey from being captured as a prisoner of war, essentially, and then getting back to try to save his family, and that journey on how to get back. And the whole time the movie's being spoke in the original Mayan language. I don't know if it's a dead language or not, but they're speaking Mayan the entire movie. So these actors in this movie are speaking Mayan. So again, I'm not for sure about the if that's the language that's still spoke today or not, but they resurrected it to do this movie. And it's an absolutely amazing film. It's a really brutal movie in a lot of parts. And there's decapitations and hearts being ripped out, people being killed with all kind of matter of weaponry. And then just like essentially you're getting the feeling of what a father / husband will do to save his family if he can, even if we're talking about I don't even know what year this is supposed to take place, but let's say 1600s or whatever. Even then, what would they do to protect their family? I think for a bunch of non-traditional actors, or what you consider like Hollywood actors, it's a very well done movie, very well acted. You obviously feel bad about, terrible for what's happening to these people because they're just being slaughtered, and they're being toyed with by the Incan Empire or the Inca Empire. Maybe it's Mayan culture. Younger Jaguar Empire is captured and taken into the Great Mile. Okay, so it's Mayan. I apologize. It's Mayan. So it's the Mayan people, and they show them being sacrificed to their gods. And it's just a really good movie. I think a lot of people, when this movie first came out, people were still like anti-Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson's the director of this film. And so I think a lot of people didn't want to like the movie because I've seen reviews online. They're like, don't want to give it a shot because it's Mel Gibson's the director. But if you, regardless of your thoughts about Mel Gibson, if you can put that away and watch the movie itself, it's a very well-made, action movie in a lot of ways. But it's a drama. It's a war movie of sorts, if you could call it a war movie. It's definitely kind of like a guerrilla warfare for sure. But it's a movie that I go back to quite a bit because, again, it's shot beautifully. There's a lot of great characters in this, and I just really, really enjoy the movie. And it's when they finally get to the Mayan city. I don't know if you all have ever seen this movie before, but when they finally get to the Mayan city, you see the temples and the shrines and the people dressed in outfits and their costumes. It's really it really takes it up another level. It's just really beautiful, and it's a lot to take in. It's something you don't really see too much in American cinema, quite frankly. And maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't seen it. And I watch a lot of movies, so I would recommend Apocalypto if you're looking for a movie that is not your traditional movie. The entire movie is in the Mayan language. There's not a single English word spoken. Maybe at the very end, there's a scene that happens that kind of like, kind of sets the movie and the trajectory it's going to head, and like historically. But 99.9999%, the entire film is shot and acted in Mayan. So that's one of my first films is Apocalypto by Mel Gibson.
Chris, have you seen Apocalypto?
I have. I've seen it a few times. I kind of put it off because I'd heard a lot of bad things because I think, like Jason was saying, the whole anti-Mel Gibson attitude. And once again, I don't like reading movies, and you have to read that whole movie. But once I saw it, I really appreciated it. It really captures the sheer brutality of, the Mayan culture. The scene that sticks out most in my mind is the one where they basically said, if you can get away, then you're free. And they're just throwing spears down this thing. I think one of them caught him at one point. But that was an intense scene. I mean, my palms are kind of sweaty just sitting here thinking about it, because I could put myself in that headspace and what was going through this guy's mind. I mean, one wrong move, because they got all these spears coming down, and when you zig when you should have zagged, I mean, that's it. And I can imagine that dying by a spear is probably a pretty slow and grueling death. But it was more than just him, though, wasn't it? There was like 2 or 3 guys, and he was the only one.
Yeah, it's all his fellow warriors.
Mm-hmm.
They lined him up, and they said, "You have like 5 seconds to run." They're like, "This, you're free. Just run." And they know it's a trick, but they can run into the cornfields, and then they're free. And so they give them like a 5-second head start, and then 5 to 8 of the Mayan warriors are waiting back there, and then they start launching the spears after like 5 seconds, because of course the spears have to have that trajectory, right? So you can't throw it like right in front of them; they're not going to hit you. So they have them running, and then they throw it up, and it's just like a game. It's like playing baseball or basketball. It's a game to them trying to hit them a moving target.
And then he was trying to get his wife and child out of that well or whatever, right?
Yeah, they're in that pit.
Yeah, and it starts raining.
Yeah, they keep amping it up. It's raining. They're getting ready to drown. She's giving birth. She has a 3-year-old that she's trying to keep him alive. It's like it just keeps going up. Mm-hmm. What about you, Dustin? Have you seen that one or no?
I have, and I want to say this. I do actually watch a fair amount of foreign language movies. For anyone who is reluctant to watch a foreign language movie, Apocalypto is the perfect one to start with. Number one, doesn't have a ton of dialogue. And number two, you can get the whole gist of the movie without dialogue. That's how well made it is. So
yeah, I agree. Yeah.
All right. I guess I could talk about my second one.
Sure, go for it.
I'm a big Western fan. I grew up watching Western movies. So and I actually have the DVD of this one. This one is The Bravados. And this came out in 1958. It stars Gregory Peck. And Lee Van Cleef has a smaller role in it. He's for Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Yeah. Now, this is very interesting because the outside appearance of this movie, it just seems like your typical run-of-the-mill Western movie, but it's just so well made that it transcends that a little bit. When I first watched it, what surprised me the most, since I'm a big Western fan, I'm always looking at top greatest Westerns ever made, or this and that, the best Western movies, to try to make sure that I have seen them all. And I've never seen this on anybody's list. And I think it belongs because, anyways, Gregory Peck, he plays a rancher. You don't find this out until 20 or so minutes into the movie, but his wife has been raped and murdered. He comes to this town where these 4 men are set to be hung, and it's for an unrelated murder. But we come to find out that he wants revenge on them for killing his wife. So he's in town. He wants to watch their execution. And in the meantime, the executioner shows up, or what we believe is the executioner, and he's actually their buddy, and he helps them break out of prison. So now Gregory Peck is hunting them down, trying to kill them all off. But what prevents this movie from being sort of your run-of-the-mill Western, like I said, is it has a surprise twist ending, and which I can't tell you, but it makes the movie feel special, refreshing, almost modern. It feels almost like something that would have been made, a few years ago, rather than 60 years ago. So other than that, the only thing I can really say is Gregory Peck does a great job, as he usually does. It's great. It's filmed down in Mexico. It has this beautiful landscape, and you can actually stream it for free on YouTube.
Wow.
The Bravados.
Bravados. All right, Chris. What about you, homie?
All right, so my number 2 is The Believer, which was released in 2001. It has a 7.1 IMDb rating. That one was directed by Henry Bean, and it starred Ryan Gosling, Billy Zane, and Summer Phoenix. And this movie was intense. And essentially what it's about is Ryan Gosling plays a kid that grows up in a traditional Jewish household. He goes to a Jewish school, learns the Jewish scriptures, and doesn't agree with any of it. And to such a degree that he ends up becoming a neo-Nazi skinhead. And so the whole movie, this kid is like completely torn because, I mean, you look at the dynamic of that, you essentially hate what you are to the point where you become the complete antithesis. And so he kind of runs this little skinhead crew, and they go through. I'm not exactly sure where it was filmed. I think it was New York, and causing havoc. But the kid's got the gift of gab, kind of the Hitler dichotomy, and ends up working for this. Not necessarily working for, but joining this fascist group, and they're trying to get into politics. And so they use him as basically a spokesman, and they get him away from the skinhead thing and get him in a suit and tie and put him in a public forum to advance these people's cause. And I don't want to get too deep into it, but it's got a pretty surprise ending. I don't want to say it's got religious undertones, but I think at the same time it does. But it really makes you think. And it was weird to see Ryan Gosling in that setting, because you figure the year before this is when they did Remember the Titans, and you remember his character from that, right? Well, now he doesn't like black people, he doesn't like Jews, he doesn't like anybody unless you're white, right? So it was interesting to see him in that role, and I think he did it really convincingly. But I'm not sure if any of you have ever seen this one, but I'd highly recommend it.
I hadn't seen it. Have you seen it, Dustin?
I have not seen it.
No. I did watch the trailer after you suggested it, and just that 3-minute trailer, I was like, wow, it seems to be pretty intense. So I think you and I have talked about maybe watching it eventually and doing a kind of review about the film. But it's definitely another kind of heavy. The topics and the content's a heavy topic and content, so it's definitely not Guardians of the Galaxy, that's for sure. But you said Ryan Gosling's in it. Who else was the other actor? Did you mention someone else?
Billy Zane, Summer Phoenix.
Billy Zane, Summer Phoenix.
All right. There were some other kind of low key actors and actresses in it, but those were the ones that stuck out in my mind.
Billy Zane from The Phantom and the Titanic and Demon Knight fame. So yeah. All right. So my next one is a 1985 movie. I guess you could call it a drama, but I don't know if it's the very first movie for some of these two specific actors, but it's early in their careers, and it's called Tough Turf, starring James Spader and Robert Downey Jr. And so basically, James Spader his name's Morgan, and he comes from the East Coast of Los Angeles, and he ended up meeting up with this girl, and they hit it off. And of course, this girl is the girlfriend of this guy who's in the Tufts. It's a gang in Los Angeles called the Tufts, and she's always thought that's the best life she's ever gonna have, is being like this chick to this gang member from this gang called the Tufts. And then Morgan, the James Spader character, shows her like, hey, upper middle class ain't all that bad. And so she's wants to dip out on the gang and wants to start hanging out with James Spader. James Spader becomes best buds, with Robert Downey Jr., who's also part of like this like kind of like punk band or like retro wave band of the '80s, and he's rocking with the blue blazer, the pink blazer over like the, kind of like Ducky or whatever from the '80s, and he kind of had that cool like '80s look, and he has this like little band he does, and they become like fast friends, and of course it's like about James Spader versus this gang of like bad guys called the Toughs, and it's a movie that you don't hear a lot about. It just recently got a release, I think, in the last year or two on Blu-ray, on one of those boutique Blu-ray companies, DVD physical media companies. But I found this at like a pawn shop or a flea market about 2-3 years ago for $1. And I was like, and this movie, I don't know if it still does, but this movie usually goes for 40 or 50 bucks online because it's such a rare movie. And it's like I said, it's one of the first movies of these two actors. And I had never even heard of it. I just stumbled upon it. I was going through a bunch of movies. And I said, Tough Turf, what is that? I go, is that James Spader? Like, Robert Downey Jr. is not even on the cover. He's only on the back, like this little picture right here. Whoops. If you see right there, that's Robert Downey Jr. Like, really, there's like a little, like, you don't even realize it's him. He's just starting his career. And he's great in it. I mean, honestly, I like him more than I like the James Spader character in this movie. It's really good. But like, but anyway, so that's a little about the movie. I don't give too much away because I do think it's a gem that people don't know about. It's definitely a time capsule of the '80s. It's cheesy. A lot of obviously the dialogue is kind of like cringy, as the kids say nowadays. But it's still a good watch, and it definitely, if you like to have some nostalgia, or if you're like, what was the '80s like? What was the fashion like? What was the music like? This would be it. Tough Turf.
I never even heard of that one, so that's a new one to me.
Well, see, there we go. That's the purpose of this, to try to introduce each other to movies that we had never heard, and maybe the few people who might want to watch will want to join along. So, what about you, Dustin? What's next?
Okay, so the next one I'm picking is actually a Disney movie.
Oh,
wanted to pick
right
a little
up Chris's
variety.
alley.
It's definitely not like a little kids movie, but if you were going to sit down with your family, this one would be an okay one to watch. This just came out in 2019, and it's called Togo.
Togo.
And it's directed by Erickson Core, who directed the movie Invincible with Marky Mark and the Vince Papale movie. And it stars Willem Dafoe.
Okay.
And it's a dog sled movie. So if you like Iron Will or Call of the Wild, you'll like this one. It's based on a true story, and it's about the 1925 serum run. So what happened in 1925 is there was a diphtheria outbreak in Nome, Alaska. And like all the kids in Nome, Alaska were sick. So the mayor wanted to fly in the serum or the antidote, but there was a big storm, so they couldn't fly it in, and they were worried about all these kids dying. So they get Willem Dafoe and his whole dog team, to go and make this 600-mile round trip dog sled in this terrible winter storm. So they cut back. The movie isn't linear. Like, it cuts back between flashbacks of him raising the dog and them on the trek. But it's very well made. The difference, like the recent Call of the Wild with Harrison Ford was not a bad movie, but the dogs were all CGI. And in this movie, they use real dogs. For a few scenes, they use CGI, but that was just for the safety of the animals. But for the most part, it's a real dog. And so he's on this treacherous trek to get this serum. And in the meantime, wherever the serum is, I can't remember the name of the town, but they come up with this plan. They're going to have a relay. They have outposts like every 31 miles. And so they're going to have guys ride these 31-mile sections. And so Willem Dafoe's going there, and the other guy's coming to him, and they meet each other up. Willem Dafoe gets the serum, starts heading back, and he gets just about there. He stops at the last outpost, or maybe it wasn't I don't remember what. But anyways, he hands the serum off to the next guy, who takes it back to Nome. And most of you guys probably heard of the dog Balto.
Yeah, I know. I've heard of Balto. Yeah.
Okay, there's movies about him. He's got his own statue in freaking New York City, whatever. But anyways, Balto is the lead dog of the final little relay leg, and Balto becomes the hero, even though Togo did the longest trek for sure. But I guess I should have spoiler alerted that, because I kind of pretty much told the whole movie. But but it's a really great movie. I sat down to watch something with my kids one time, and we saw this and watched it, and I was surprised at how good it was. So Togo.
And is it live action? I'm assuming then. It sounds like, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's live action, and it's on Disney Plus. If you guys have Disney Plus, you could watch it on that.
Sweet.
Yeah, I have seen that one. I've seen that one. I'd forgotten about it, but that was really good.
Yeah, I want to watch that. I mean, you also said some really good ones. I haven't heard only about, I think, Bravados, I think, is the only one I've heard so far. I know about.
Yeah, the cinematography in that movie was amazing, and the dual layers story, like he was talking about, where it shows him raising the dogs and how they got from where they started to where they are now. I thought that was a really neat dynamic, and the action in it is phenomenal. So, no, I would definitely recommend that one as well.
All right, what do you got, Chris?
All right, so the next movie on my list is The Rocker from 2008, and that one has a 6.2 IMDb rating, directed by Peter Cattaneo, and starred Rainn Wilson, Christina Applegate, Emma Stone, Jason Sudeikis, and Bradley Cooper played a small part in that. And this one kind of flew under the radar. I don't think I even saw this until about four years ago. When I saw it, I was like, man, this is like School of Rock. It was almost like the same template. But I actually think this one was a little bit better. And essentially the story is Rainn Wilson plays a drummer in this up and coming band, and they're trying to play in the club scene, and they get signed. But as a stipulation of their signing, they have to kick out Rainn Wilson's character, the drummer, because the producers or the record company owner's son wanted to play drums. And so they talk about it, and they finally decide, you know what? Yeah, we're going to go ahead and kick you to the curb. So he ends up working at some metal rack company and is completely washed up, 40-year-old, never got to live his dream. And the band that he was a part of ends up blowing up and becomes like the biggest band in the world. And so this is constantly being put in his face of, what you could have been. And so he ends up freaking out, loses his job, loses his girlfriend, and ends up living in his sister's attic, which was played by Jane Lynch. And due to circumstances, his sister's son has a band, and their drummer gets suspended or expelled from school for bringing, it was like hash brownies or something, to school. And one of the teachers got high. And so they ask Rainn Wilson's character if he wants to play drums for their prom. So he does. And, the people like it, and he ends up becoming their drummer. And long story short, they go on tour and they gain fame and all that. And it kind of climaxes when they're told that they're going to open for the band that he was a part of. So, he's kind of met with that conflict. But I thought it was really well done. And I think it got overshadowed because, like I said, School of Rock came out at the same time. Rainn Wilson wasn't all that big of a character, or a movie star in comparison to like Jack Black. And the other big actors in it were still kind of in their infancy, except for Christina Applegate, who had kind of faded into obscurity. So it's a good comedy movie. So if you're looking for something for a boring night, that's a good one to go with.
Go ahead. Have you seen it, Dustin?
I haven't seen it. I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it yet.
I remember watching it when it first came out. I did see it, and I remember thinking it was going to be completely different. I thought it was going to be, I don't know. I don't know if I thought it was going to be like a documentary or like a docudrama type thing, or it was supposed to be like more of like it's, you know, again, like a drama. And then it turned into be more of like a comedy, even though I should have known because it's Rainn Wilson. I don't know what I was exactly what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting that. I need to revisit. I remember at the time not being like a huge big up on it, but I also didn't think it sucked. I just was like, this isn't what I was thinking it was.
Well, I think
So
the best part of that was the reason they got famous is, you know, he ends up getting kicked out of his sister's attic and he lives in the underneath this Chinese restaurant, right? And it's always extremely hot down there. And so he's no longer allowed to have contact with his nephew. And so his nephew brings him a computer and a camera. And he's not understanding that this camera is not a microphone. A camera is a camera. So it's hot down there. So he like strips down naked, right? And they're doing their practice over live video feed. And the brother is hogging up all the bandwidth. So his sister gets mad and she clicks on to see what he's doing. She sees her uncle playing drums naked. So she streams this thing to YouTube. And so he becomes known as the Naked Drummer. And that's kind of how they got noticed by the record company.
oh my gosh, awesome. All right, so next up for me is a movie. I want to say it came out in 1988, and I am correct. So I'd have been 10 years old when this came out, I believe, or close to it. And it is a 1980s horror movie that like no one ever talks about, but it was a huge. We're talking about VHS a few minutes ago with you, Dustin. This was a VHS like almost every weekend rental for me for like, it felt like forever. Me and my brother and some of the other neighborhood friends, and it was the movie Waxwork. So the movie Waxwork is it's a horror movie. It stars the same guy, Zach Galligan from the Gremlins movies. If you all remember Gremlins, it's the same actor. Deborah Foreman, who's also in lots of horror movies, and also David Warner, who he was in lots of stuff. He was in like David Warner was in The Omen. He was also in Titanic with Billy Zane. But anyways, the way this movie is, it's a waxwork museum, and there's these lifelike scenes made in wax of these wax characters, but they're all from like horror movies. So they have like vampire movie scenes and Frankenstein and zombies and Creature from the Black Lagoon and just like mad scientists, like all of those things, right? Aliens coming from like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And what you don't know is that this is a traveling wax museum that goes from town to town, and to keep this wax museum alive, they have to get unsuspecting people to go to it. And then when they get close to the rope where they tell you can't go into the actual waxwork, little diagram thing they have built up, they push them inside of it. And when they go inside of it, when they step inside the actual little setup they have for the waxwork, it turns into real life. So now they go into that actual scene from that movie or that experience. So like they get pushed in, and this kid goes into like a werewolf scene. And so now he has to fight for his life against a werewolf or a vampire. And so this thing comes to life, and they become a part of the scene. And if they get killed, they become part of the Waxwork Museum. And it's a really cool. And the whole idea is to get out of there before you get killed, because if you get killed by the creature that you go into that scene with, then you, like I said, you become waxed, and now that's you stuck in there forever. You're dead, and that's how they keep this thing going. And so, it's great special effects for the 80s. This is not a deep thinking movie. It's definitely a popcorn pizza movie with your friends. Again, another 80s like throwback film that just makes you go, wow, okay, this is definitely an 80s vibe picture. But I love this movie. It's a movie that a lot of people don't talk about. when you talk about horror movies, a lot of people talk about Friday the 13th. They talk about Nightmare on Elm Street. They talk about Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So some of these other movies that are like lesser known don't get as much love. So this one for me is Waxwork, starring Zach Galligan. So there you go. So
I have not seen that one.
yeah, I figured not many people have. So, what about you, Chris? You seen that?
No, I've never even heard of it.
All right. Well, my next one is actually a 1984 low budget British made for TV movie.
You told me about this, I think.
Yeah, it's called Threads. It's directed by Mick Jackson, and he directed The Bodyguard with Whitney Houston and Kevin Costner. That was his most popular movie. But anyways, a lot of people, this movie is about mutually assured destruction. You know, like both two countries have their hand on the red button. It's about nuclear war. It was made during the Cold War, and I've seen a lot of critics say that this is the scariest movie of all time. It's not your typical horror movie, but the threat in this movie is something that's very real. You know, it's not a clown that lives in a sewer or a demon or any. You know, it's actually something that tangibly exists and could happen. So it doesn't really have a typical plot. I mean, it has a plot and characters, but it kind of jumps around to different characters. Early on in the film, the people are like going about their lives like it's every day, nothing's going on. They're watching TV and they're seeing all these events unfold, and there's protesters, but they really can't do anything about it. They just hope for the best and just continue with their lives. But eventually the nuclear bomb hits Sheffield, England, I believe. And then the rest of the movie unfolds just showing the devastation of the bomb and the fallout. And I think they go up to like 13 years after the bomb and show what the world is going to be like. And I think the reason why it's low budget. So like even the explosions are like stock footage and stuff, but I think it's so like scary because they just present it very coldly, like with cold narration, captions with no emotion. They're just stating the facts. It's almost like a documentary style. There's very little music in it. They actually consulted with Carl Sagan, famous scientist, to like make sure they got everything right. So there's certain things that you don't even think about, like they have a nuclear winter, so the ash and everything like blocks out the sun completely, and the temperatures drop to freezing levels, and people are dying, freezing to death and everything. And then when the sun finally comes out, there's so much damage to the ozone layer that you have to like go out completely protected, or else you'll like burn up from the sun.
Oh wow.
It shows it goes on to like the very next generation is already like reverted back to like caveman like lifestyle. Like they talk with like grunts and guttural sounds, and they go around like raping each other and all this stuff. And then they're farming. They try to farm to make some food, but there's no gasoline anymore, so they're out there with like garden hose and stuff. Like it's just crazy, like how you think about a nuclear bomb and how devastating it'd be, but you don't think about like how many other crazy shit's gonna happen to the world if this ever happens. So, and then I'll read one quote from critic Peter Bradshaw. "It wasn't until I saw Threads that I found that something on screen could make me break out in a cold, shivering sweat and keep me in that condition for 20 minutes, followed by weeks of depression and anxiety." So that's, to me, the biggest weakness of this film probably the only weakness of this film is that it's depressing. And I think everybody should watch it and then probably never watch it again, because it doesn't, it's not really enjoyable, but it's still like sort of like mind blowing and well made. And this one's also available on Tubi. So if you guys wanted to check it out.
Threads. All right. Sounds like a wonderful, lighthearted picture. What about you, Chris? What's up next for you?
All right. So my next one is a movie from 2010 called Hesher. And that received a 7.0 IMDb rating, directed by Spencer Susser, and starred Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Rainn Wilson once again, and Natalie Portman. Now, this is kind of a movie that gets really mixed reviews. It's kind of you either love it or you hate it. It's a very, very dark comedy drama. But what's interesting about this movie is I think this was the first, and if I'm not mistaken, only movie that ever was authorized to use Metallica's music. And as a matter of fact, like the logo for Hesher on the cover is actually has the Metallica lettering to it. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of detail because it's been a long time since I've seen it, but it's one that most people haven't. But essentially, this kid, his mom dies in a car accident, and Rainn Wilson, who plays the dad, is pretty much catatonic, popping pills all day. The grandma is just kind of in her routine, trying to hold things together. And this kid ends up getting into an altercation with I think it was the tow truck driver that took the mom's car away. She was killed in a car accident. And so this kid had like this sentimental attachment to this car. And so you don't really understand what's going on as you're watching the movie. You just see this kid hauling ass down the road on his bicycle, chasing after this tow truck towing a car. But he gets into that altercation, and this kid Hesher comes out of nowhere, and he's just a drifter. And I'm not sure if they intended to have him look like the original bassist for Metallica, Cliff Burton, but if they didn't try, they did a very good job in doing so anyway. Because they're very similar in appearance, and I would say even in how they present themselves and how they talk. But I don't really understand what they were trying to get at in this movie. But Hesher does, in the midst of his vulgar way of communicating, does offer some perspective. But like I said, it's one of these movies that you either love it or you hate it, but it is very, very dark. So I'm not sure if either one of you have seen it. Say proceed with caution is where it was my best advice. So if you're already in a not so good mood, I don't recommend this one.
Puts you over the edge.
Yeah, because Rainn Wilson's very convincing in this movie, and it's so out of character for him. It's almost like Matthew McConaughey and Killer Joe, right? Just completely out of character, but he does it very well.
Yeah, I like that. I like actors or actresses that does a role that's so much against their stereotype or against type, whatever that you're used to seeing them as. And if they pull it off, that is, of course, they are able to pull it off. They can dig deep and do something completely different. Like, I'm impressed by that because, I want to see an actor be pushed out of their comfort zone. So that's good. And you said that whole soundtrack is nothing but Metallica?
No, not the whole soundtrack, but I want to say it was like 7 or 8 songs. And it's the early stuff too, not the, post haircut era. It was a lot of Kill 'Em All. I think it was all Kill 'Em All through and Justice for All. It was that era between like 82 and 88, 89.
Nice. Back when they were actually good.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Oh man. Okay. So I'm going the completely opposite direction of a film where it's like serious and you have to be like prepared to be like crying and weeping and gnashing of teeth. And that is, I want to say this came out in like 2000 and maybe 5 or something. I'm not for sure what year it is, but it's around there. It is Black Dynamite. So Black Dynamite. This is with Michael J. White. He's in lots of like direct to DVD, direct to VHS back in the day. Action star. He played Spawn. If you remember the movie Spawn, he was Spawn. But he plays a blaxploitation from the 70s character, and it's a spoof. It's like Naked Gun. Like Naked Gun, like it spoofed all the action movies. Like this is spoofing all the blaxploitation films from the 70s. So, I mean, like this is fantastic. It even tells you he's super bad. He's out of sight. He's Black Dynamite. I mean, that's the kind of attitude. There's another quote back here. Black Dynamite is a kung fu fighting, tip slapping, gun blasting, outrageously over the top 70s era blaxploitation film that delivers big action and even bigger laughs and nobody's business.
That's a lot of themes.
Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely awesome. This movie is so like perfect. It's down to there's like a scene where he's in bed with like all these like naked chicks, like from different races. There's like a black girl, a white girl, an Asian girl, whatever. And then there's like a scene where the boom mic gets into the scene and they have to pull it back out because it's like showing up in the actual camera angle, and they have to pull it back out. And like it's like stuff like that, like little like winks and nods to there. You have Arsenio Hall's in here. Tommy Davidson, he goes by Cream Corn. He goes, "What's up, Cream Corn?" So it's just like this movie is hilarious. I mean, it is over the top hilarious. It is so ridiculous. He's a kung fu fight machine.
What year was
and
that
he
released?
like does all these like kung fu fighting them now. Michael J. White can actually do martial arts, but he's having to pretend to be an actor who is pretending to be able to do martial arts. So it's like he's doing these like huh, huh, huh. And then the guy's like, oh, and like falls backwards and does all these like flips and stuff. And it's over the top ridiculous. So if you like Naked Gun, you like the scary movies that's like lampooning Scream, then you would like this movie because it's the same vein of taking a genre and then just like lampooning all the ridiculous stuff in it. But it's a fantastic movie. It's a good laugh for sure.
What year was that released?
I want to say like 2005-ish, something like that. It might have around then. I'll look one more time, but I didn't really see a year on here. But yeah, somewhere towards the end of 2000. It may be more like 2009 or something, but it was in the last decade, or even 2 decades ago now. I can't believe it. I mean, we're in a whole new decade now, I guess, technically. So yeah. So the movie's about 13 years old. I bet 14 years old. Have either one of you seen it?
No.
I've actually seen it.
Oh, okay.
But when I saw it short, when it was new, and at that time I hadn't really been exposed to any blaxploitation movies, so it was. I mean, I didn't dislike it, but I feel like if I watched it now, I'd get a lot more out of it. Because now I've seen, Blackula and Foxy Brown and a lot of other ones since then. So
yeah, it's like I said, like you said, even if you haven't seen those movies, it's a comedy and it's like a spoof parody. So if you can appreciate a over the top ridiculous comedy like Airplane and like a Naked Gun and all that kind of stuff, it's in that same vein of just like so absurd. I mean, it's ridiculous, So it's like they pretend to speak Chinese, but it's like dubbed and like they're still talking, but the Chinese have stopped or whatever. It's just stuff like that from the 70s. And so, anyways, I found it pretty amusing. Have you ever seen it, Chris?
No. The only blaxploitation stuff I've seen is the Pam Grier stuff from the 70s.
Yeah, well, that's the good stuff anyways. It's very, I know a lot of people romanticize blaxploitation as being some like the best stuff out there. And there are some really good films, but there was a lot of crap too. So it's you got to kind of go through it with a fine-tuned comb to really figure out like the quality ones over this ridiculous just dreck. So what about you, Dustin? What's next on the horizon?
Okay, for my final movie of the night or day or whatever, I'm picking a horror Western comedy.
Oh, whoa.
What could that be?
I'm intrigued. Horror Western comedy, yes.
1999's Ravenous.
Yes, I love that movie.
So this movie stars Guy Pearce and Robert Carlyle and David Arquette. And it's kind of like a cannibal movie meets a vampire movie meets a Civil War movie meets a stoner comedy. It's extremely unique.
Yes.
So it takes place during the Mexican-American War, and Captain John Boyd, who was played by Guy Pearce, is sent to this remote outpost in the Sierra Nevada. And when he gets there, it's like a bunch of like misfits and very unique characters. And shortly after he arrives, a stranger shows up, like a guy's got frostbite, just not doing good. Guy by the name of Calhoun, and he's played by Robert Carlyle. And he tells a story about how he was part of this wagon train and they were misled and ended up getting stranded in a cave. They ended up eating their oxen, eating their horses, eating the dog, and eventually resorted to cannibalism. So apparently, I think they said there was one or a few people that were still stuck in the cave. So they assemble a rescue party to go save these last couple people. And when they get there, they find out it's a trap that Calhoun led them to, and he kills some of them and eats some of them. And it's just so. The reason why I say it's like a vampire film is because cannibalism in this movie is like once you become a cannibal, once you eat some human flesh, you crave it. You can't stop going after it, and it heals your wounds and cures diseases and all this stuff. So it's just a very unique movie, and it didn't do very well when it came out. And I think it's because they just had no idea how to market it. How do we market this movie? And it's even like, it's pretty amazing that this movie even exists, because it was put out by I think 20th Century Fox. Yeah, 20th Century Fox. So it's like a big time movie company putting out this type of unique movie. It's just wild. The music in it, I can remember the first time I watched it, like they start out with this really weird guitar or mandolin or ukulele or something. It's just it sort of was like off-putting. Like I didn't like the music at first, but then after seeing the movie a couple times, it totally goes with the movie, and the music's actually pretty awesome. So that's my last movie. And make sure to take note of the year 1999, because when I was looking this up, there's like 3 or 4 movies called Ravenous, but this is the 1999 one that you want to look for.
Right. Yeah, Jeffrey Jones is in this as well, and I like his character in there.
Yeah.
Who played the principal in the Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and among other movies. But but yeah, have you seen that movie before, Chris? Have you seen Ravenous?
No. As he was describing it, the movie that came to mind was 2001 Maniacs. But no, I've never seen Ravenous.
Well, I feel like Ravenous is a much better film. I like 2000 Maniacs, even though it's a remake of a Hesher Gordon Lewis movie from back in the 60s or whatever, or maybe early 70s. But Ravenous is a really good movie. I think that most of all the effects are practical effects, Dustin. I think so, yeah. I mean, I'm sure they might have used a little bit of CGI because it was 1999, but it was definitely mostly practical effects. And it's pretty wild. Yeah, I remember watching it when it first came out. I had no idea what to expect, but I can guarantee you, me and anybody else who saw that movie in the theater were like, that is not the movie we thought we were seeing. so, yeah. What about you, Chris? What's next on your list?
All right, so I actually have 3 more. But the next on the list is My Way, which was from 2011, another Korean film. And that has a 7.7 IMDb rating and was directed by GQ Kang. And this introduced me to an aspect of World War II that I had no idea about. and that they found Asians fighting for the Germans at Normandy. I had never heard that before, and I thought it was a little far-fetched, but right around the time I watched this, my wife had bought me a book on one of her trips. I don't know if she went to Berlin or what, but she bought me a World War II book. And like, that was one of the first things they talked about, is the Koreans and the Japanese that they found at Normandy. But this movie was directed by one of the premier South Korean directors, but was not received well to the Korean populace. And actually, I think it broke him. I don't know if he ever made another movie, because he had spent so much money making this movie, and to have it not perform the way it was expected to, I think it was one of the last things he did. But essentially it talks about the dynamic, which I don't think a lot of people understand, of the Japanese occupation of Korea up to and including World War II, and kind of the relationship between the two cultures. And essentially what happens is they allow the South Koreans to compete for the 1936 Olympics, but they pretty much make it to a point where they can't win, even though the South Korean runner was faster than the Japanese runners. One of the Japanese guys trips him, and they say that the Korean guy tried to trip the other guy, so he was disqualified. And it erupts into a riot, and they arrest all these people and put them in prison. Well, World War II pops off, and they say, we need people. So they take all these people out of the prison and put them into the Japanese army. So initially you have the Japanese with these Koreans fighting the Russians. And so they get overrun by the Russians. And so they get taken to Siberia and put in a POW camp, where it was pretty terrible conditions. Not just the cold alone, but how they were treated. But then the Germans, on their attack on the Western Front, or the Eastern Front, overtakes this prisoner of war camp. And the Germans need people because, if you know anything about the campaign on the Eastern Front, they lost a lot of people just due to the cold, let alone battle conditions. So the Germans overtake this Russian POW camp. Well, then they get conscripted into the German army, and they're shipped to the Western Front, and that's how they got to Normandy. Now, the story is not 100% based on, real events, but it's kind of a compilation of different people to tell one story. But it was really good. Like I said, I don't like reading movies, and I think that was the first one I ever read, and I read through the movie 3 or 4 times before I found out it had overdubs. So for somebody that doesn't like to read movies, if I'm willing to watch it 3 times, I think it speaks to how well it was done.
What did you say the name was? Was it?
It's
again,
called
Chris?
My Way.
Or The Highway. Yeah, I'm definitely interested in that movie. I want to check it out. I have a friend of mine who's Korean American. Well, I guess I don't know if he's American now, but Korean from Korea, and he's always sending me movies from South Korea and stuff. So I'm going to tell him, like, yo, dude, you need to get me this movie. And he lives in Los Angeles, in Koreatown in Los Angeles. So I'm sure he'll find it for me and send it my way. So he'll know what it is. When did the movie come out? Do you know what year that movie came out?
2011.
Okay. So I guess I'm going to also show up another foreign film. We're like kicking around these foreign films a lot. I didn't realize that until we start talking about it. I have a couple other ones I can just quickly talk about, but the one I kind of want to focus on, and if you're an action movie guy, I don't know, either one of you all big fans of action movies? I don't know. I would assume. Yeah. I would assume a lot of us dudes grew up in the 80s and 90s. Like, action movies were like such an important part of our growing up in childhood. But if you all haven't noticed, like, a lot of action movies nowadays, it's hard to find like a good quality action movie. You have like John Wick finally, but outside of John Wick, like, very few like hard hitting, brutal action movies aren't being made much anymore. And at least not that I'm aware of. But this movie, this actor, he's in multiple different stuff, but he started out with one movie. This is a part 2. I couldn't find the whole series, but if you know anything about it, it's the Raid movies. And this is Raid 2. It's an Indonesian movie. The actor, his real name Iko Uwais, but he goes by the name Rama in this movie. If you all watched, I think 2011 or 2010, if you remember the remake of Judge Dredd with Keith Urban, I believe his name, and like it's like there's in a hotel or apartment building, and he's having to like battle all the way up to the very top level. They stole that from Raid 1. The first Raid movie was the exact same thing. I mean, exactly. And they took that and then they made Judge Dredd and made it with American sensibilities. But this is the Raid 2. And if you take all the Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan in camera real action scenes and you turn it up to like 45, then you need to add another 55. Because this is the most hard-hitting, in-camera, real fighting that you'll ever see in movies. I mean, like, it's unbelievable. If you have not seen this, I mean, the action scenes are like dances, like tremendous set pieces that they use everything, bats, like just like think like kind of like the Bourne movies where anything can be a weapon. It's like that, but with guys who actually know martial arts. And not actors pretending to be martial artists, but martial artists who happen to can act somewhat. But I mean, it is absolutely amazing. And again, if you're a video game player, I'm not a video game player, but if you can kind of think like you start out with the weakest boss, and then you work your way to the top big boss, it's like that. It's like every time he goes into another part of this house or room or building or whatever, he has to find an even tougher boss. And they don't cut away. Like when people get their heads smashed in, arms broken, throats slashed, whatever, the camera's like right up on it. There's no cuts, nothing like that. It's all right there in camera. And I just have to put this movie over. Like, if this actor is such a fantastic actor, at least action-wise, the movie's just fantastic. Again, it's a lot of hard hitting. It's not for the weak stomach people. It's again, I mean, there's this one guy right here, one of the main bad guys. He has these, you see these blades. I mean, he just is like slicing and dicing people like butter. This dude right here at the baseball bat, like literally that baseball bat is like up against people's skulls the entire movie. I mean, and the camera does not cut away. So it's so anyways. If you've not seen these movies, there's a Raid 1, there's a Raid 2. I would highly recommend it. Have you either one of you seen the Raid movies?
I have not seen either one of them, no.
Okay. Yeah. Well, buckle up, buckaroos, because it's definitely an experience. Dustin, do you have any like honorable mentions or anything, since Chris and I have a couple just quick ones?
I guess I have a few sitting right here. I just happen to have a stack here of some decent ones. I'll just briefly talk about. So, Magic,
yeah. Anthony Hopkins, yes.
Anthony Hopkins and Anne Margaret, Burgess Meredith. It's about a guy who has a ventriloquist dummy that's talking to him and telling him to kill people, stuff like that. Jacob's Ladder, starring Tim Robbins. This is maybe a little bit more popular than some of the other ones I talked about, but definitely like a good movie. Definitely a movie that you're watching the whole time and your thing is like, how is this going to come to an end? And it's sort of a surprise ending. So, and then I guess I got this one too. Play Misty for me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. This is Clint Eastwood. I think this is his first movie that he directed. He plays a radio DJ who has this woman is like a stalker and after him and in love with him and everything. So check those ones out if you haven't seen them.
All right, Chris, what about you? You have a couple left, you said?
Yeah, so my next one is City of the Dead, or otherwise known as Horror Hotel, from 1960. And that has a 6.8 IMDb rating, directed by John Llewellyn Moxey. And that was actually his first film, first full-length film. and it starred Christopher Lee. And what directed me to this movie, because I don't generally dip back into the what do they call it, the golden age of cinema. The band The Misfits, which I'm a big fan of, pretty much all names their movies or names their songs based on horror movies, because that's where Glenn Danzig got a lot of his inspiration from. And they had a song called Horror Hotel. And essentially this movie is about a co-ed who is into witchcraft and the occult. And she goes to this town, I think it was in Massachusetts, to kind of learn more about witchcraft. And it's this really weird town that has really bad vibes. And she soon realizes that she has been marked for sacrifice. So
I hate when it happens.
Right?
It sucks.
Damn the luck.
I know, I'm like, not again.
Yeah, but it's really well filmed, really good acting. It's probably my favorite early cinema movies. So do you want me to go through my next one, or do you want to
Yeah, go ahead, dude. I have two other ones I'm just gonna talk quickly about as well.
Okay. And then this one's probably the most popular, or I'd say the most known from my list, is The Mule from 2018, with directed by Clint Eastwood, starring Clint Eastwood and Bradley Cooper. Essentially, you know, this guy, he's kind of at the end of his life, and he's got some financial issues. He's kind of estranged from his family. And long story short, he is offered the opportunity to drive for, unbeknownst to him, the cartel. And so, you know, he's kind of an escapist anyway, so he likes to spend time on the road, but he ends up becoming this cartel's best mule for drugs and whatever have you. And what I liked most about that movie, aside from the movie itself, was the fact that a lot of it was filmed in the city that I bought my house in. So a lot of the scenes in there are places that I know. For instance, where they had the graduation ceremony, that was actually filmed in the museum I used to work at. So it's just, it's got that relatability for me. But aside from that, it's just well done overall. Have y'all seen that one?
Yeah, I love The Mule.
Yep.
Have you seen The Mule?
Yes, I have seen. It's a great movie.
Yeah, I kind of like the way it ended, because it ends in a way kind of like Gran Torino. Like it has like a satisfying ending, but one that you're kind of surprised by, because it's not your traditional Hollywood ending. Like it ends in a way that's realistic. Like, you know, it's not like he cuts a deal with the FDA or, you know, the FBI or whatever. You know, he's like, no, I'm going to take one for the team. You know, it's like, you know, it's on me. You know, Gran Torino, he's like, you know what? I'm sacrificing myself, basically. You know what? I'm helping this family out. So guess what? You know, he's like, all right. So I like that. I really do. I agree. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't even know what a mule was. So when I started watching it, I'm like, is there going to be a donkey in here somewhere? What are we doing? So,
well, I remember the first time I'd heard about that movie, there's another movie called The Mule. And I started watching this thing, and like the first scene is where this guy is getting a full body cavity search. And I was like, what in the world is this? This doesn't look like a Clint Eastwood movie.
All of a sudden, it's like, wow, wow, chicka, wow, wow. Yeah. It's like, whoa. So, all right, quickly for me, next one up is a movie that a lot of people thought it was one thing, but it actually was another. It's Halloween 3. A lot of people, this movie does not have Michael Myers in it at all, except like a quick scene on a TV screen. And a lot of people, when it first came out, gave it lots of crap. But I always try to tell people, if you go back and watch this movie now, don't treat it like it's a Halloween movie with Michael Myers. Treat it like the name, Season of the Witch. If you look at it in that perspective, it is a fantastic movie where you have a weird Irish cult who wants to like take over the world by killing children with Halloween masks and a creepy song that gets stuck in your head that you can't get it out of your mind after you hear it for the first time. And people, if you watch it with that perspective, and then you have Tom, the mustache Atkins in here, who gives everybody a mustache ride that's ever in a movie in here as well. but it's a great movie. The music's great. It's like I said, children are in peril. They wear this mask that makes their heads melt off with those masks on. It's great. And like I said, people just like when they first saw, they thought they were going to get Michael Myers, which I totally understand. But now it's kind of becoming more popular. Back, 20, 30 years ago, people were just taking a big old shout out over that movie. The last movie I'm going to show, also kind of a horror-related movie, but it is my favorite animal attack film from the 70s. The director was William Girdler, who was from my hometown of Louisville, Kentucky, who ended up dying in a plane crash looking for location sites in the Philippines. And this movie stars Leslie Nielsen, and it's called Day of the Animals. And it's basically, it was like before it was cool to be like an eco warrior. This movie was preparing that generation to become eco warriors. So like about climate change, basically what happens is that one day the animals, just the climate, the earth tells the animals like, we've had enough of humans ruining the earth. It's time to fight back. So you have all these animals, and again, we're talking about, Dutch was talking about the real dogs in that movie with William Dafoe. All these animals are real animals attacking these actors or stunt people, and it is amazing. They have real birds, real mountain lions, real dogs, real coyotes, real whatever, bats, whatever, and they're attacking people, and it is absolutely the 70s like cheese, but it is the one thing I tell people about. It is a 100% worth your time, because in the middle of the movie, Leslie Nielsen, the whole time, is starting to lose touch with reality. If you all remember Leslie Nielsen, he's like the funny, like genial guy from the Naked Gun movies and Airplane and all that kind of stuff, right? In this movie, he's like a completely different person. He ends up losing touch with reality. Like he becomes like this crazy like survivalist who's ready to like rape women and beat children. And he ends up like screaming at like God or the earth, like, you can't stop me. And it's like raining, and he starts ripping his shirt off. And I'm not even exaggerating. And a bear comes out of nowhere, a real bear, and he challenges a bear to a fight. And let's just say Leslie Nielsen versus grizzly bear, it doesn't work out for Leslie Nielsen. But he's like, you can't kill me, grizzly bear. And like then the grizzly bear dismantles him. So it is so amazing. You cannot miss that. So but that was just those were my like kind of last two. So but anyway, so I don't want to keep us too long, but I first just want to say thank you for Dustin suggesting talking about some obscure films, some films that some people may know about, maybe not. I know I learned a lot today from both of you guys, from a bunch of movies I never heard of. What about you, Chris? Do you kind of want to have any parting words, or what's your thoughts?
No, this was a lot of fun. So yeah, Dustin, thanks. I enjoyed doing this. I enjoyed looking at some movies I hadn't looked at in a long time. Like Hesher, I haven't seen in probably 8 years. So I just didn't have the time to watch it again. So I couldn't really speak on it. But I did remember that the little bit of detail about the soundtrack and all that. But no, I definitely want to do this again.
I like that.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, and be glad to come on again sometimes. I wrote down another like 10 movies to add to my ever-growing list. So
that's awesome. But yeah, man, we could try to do this more often. Maybe we can do another couple of films that we obscure. We could, like we talked about before, we had a couple other ideas. But yeah, we definitely, I know for sure we would love to have to do this again, and we'll just work out a time that works for everybody and come up with a different topic or a different subject or whatnot, and kind of do that, because I think that was a lot of fun. Like you said, I picked up a bunch of movies I'm gonna definitely look at moving forward. So that's good. But I guess that's it. We don't want to keep people too long. We gave everybody roughly 20 movies to look at if they want to write down some stuff. So I guess for Dustin and then for Chris, I mean, thanks. I'm Jason, and we'll be seeing you all again real soon. So thanks for watching.